Hello, students. I'm going to start recording now a, a little introduction to this Lab 9. So it's a little bit of a stretch for us, but so we're going to have to sort of pay a bit of attention and have a look because there's a few things that we need to do. But the main idea is that we're using @media commands, and the meta for a viewport in order to change the way a web page looks depending on the size of the window in which the web page is displayed. And so we need to use that. Now, what I've got is I've got a pro forma. This is the web page before it's had the viewport and the @media commands added to it. And you can see that code there, and that's the code that you will be given as your starting point. And then we have another one which actually has the @media. This is what you're trying to achieve. So using a meta tag to check the viewports, and then @media commands are used in the CSS to determine how you will display it with different viewport sizes. And so that's the idea. Now, so let's look at that first from point of view of the website itself, with and without the @media and the viewport applied. So here we have the website. This is what you're given. The web page will look like this. It doesn't matter what we do in terms of the size of the viewport. It displays more or less the same. What we see are the images, and the elements in which those images are kept are relative to each other, stay about the same there. And so we're using some percents and things like that in the way that they are arranged relative to each other. And we see that if we just look at it, that you don't have to do this coding because it's all done. This is the stuff that's given to you. But what we see is that we've got some image boxes. The percents are set relative to each other. So it looks like the image box has a width of 45% of the element in which it sits. The image box, if we find that, the image box is kept inside a class called call. So the class image box is repeated many times. The class call is repeated many times, but the class image box, what we see is that we can fit two image boxes side by side inside of a call, potentially. Depending on what we do with any other styling. Now, the image inside an image box is going to take up 100% of the width of the image box. We see that there with 100%, and the height is set up 100%. Automatically to that. So that's the code that's given to you. You don't have to write this code, thank goodness. We've got some columns set up. The columns are cleared at the end, and that all works. And that's how that is. That is what we would call a nice fluid layout. That would be the type of thing that you should have been able to do by the end of Lab 7. So we're going to take a bit of a jump from Lab 7 to produce something like this. And this, the one that I'm going to show you now, this is a different thing. And it's, you see what's happening? See how things are changing? So here we've only got one sort of column of different games. But within that column of games, we've got two columns of images of games. And then now we've got two columns of games. And within each of those columns is a column of images of games. And so now there's two games in each, two columns of games inside each column. And so what I'm doing is I'm just making the viewport wider. And now we're getting a different view of it where we've got three columns beside each other, and each of those columns got one column of games inside that. And I'll make that a bit wider still. And now we've got three columns in each of those with two columns inside. And that seems like that's the final one. So how many different ways of displaying? Here's one with three columns of different colors and then two columns of games inside. Then three columns of different colors with one column of games inside. So that's the second way. There's a third way with two columns inside, and then another there. Okay, and then another there. So how many times is that? Is that 4 or 5 different ways of displaying things? So let's have a look at how those are achieved. And so here we see what has to happen. Very first, if you're going to do something like this, you have to have a meta tag in the head, which um, defines the viewport. Okay, give it an initial size of 1 so that we can make our changes relative to that viewport. So that's the thing that you need to do. Then you have to set up, and it's kind of like programming language. Now I counted them, but I kind of lost count. But let's see how many times we do this. 1, 2, um, 3, 4, 5, 5 different ways of displaying the data on the screen, depending on the viewport. So the very simplest one is kind of the way it was in the default, which is if the screen width is less than or equal to 600 pixels. So in other words, if the max width is 600 pixels, then what we're going to do with the column is going to take up basically the whole width of the element in which the column sits. So if we look at the column, we'll see the column class sits inside the content. And so the content is basically the page. So the column is going to take up basically the whole page, but, and what's the but on that? Sorry, where's that? Here we are. But we see that we get 2 images inside the column. And how do we know there's 2 images? Because 43% is a little bit less than half, because 50% is half. You won't get 3 times 43%, but you'll get 2 times 43% will fit into that 93%. And so that would give us our 2 images inside one column. And that's what we've got here. That's what we had with our default, right? 2 images inside one column. It didn't matter how we stretched this out, that's how that was. But with our new one, what we see is as long as we're less than 600 pixels, that's what we've got. 1 column, 2 images. That's shown there. Less than 600 pixels, 1 column, 2 images. 2 images because of the 43%. All right, so then the next one is between 600 and 800. So if I stretch this out so that it's somewhere more than 600, maybe 700 or something like that, then we get this thing here. This is going to be the one which is this is displaying in this situation here where we have the viewport is between 600 and 800 pixels. And so the situation there is, well, okay, we can see we got 2 columns. How do we know we got 2 columns? Because the width is 43%. 43% times 2, it's only is still less than that 100. That'll work. But the image box is now taking up 90% of the column. And so that's only going to give us 1 image per column. So that gives us 2 columns, 1 image per column in terms of the width. And so that's how we do it between 600 and 800. And you can see now, once you get one of these, the idea is kind of repetitive, right? So now if we go up in size a bit more between 800 and 1,000, so if we stretch this out to see somewhere more than this, we'll see it change. Okay, so this would be somewhere more than 800, but less than 1,000. And so what we've got is we got 2 columns, and each of those 2 columns has 2 images side by side in it. And that's so this is this. Okay, so there's our 2 columns. We know it's 2 columns because it's got 43% that will multiply up to 2 within 100, right? And also the image within it is going to be 2 columns. And so that's that one. That's the between 800 and 1,000. So this is something more than 800, but less than 1,000. So let's go up to the next one, which is going to be between 1,000 and 1,200. That's going to give us 3 columns. I can just see that there because 26%, multiply that by 3, it's still less than 100. But if we multiply it by 4, it'd be more than 100. So it's got to be the 3. And it's going to have 1 image inside each of 3 columns. 1 image inside each of 3 columns. So let's see how that works. There we go. There's our 3 columns and 1 image aligned in each of 3 columns. And so that's between 1,000 and 1,200. So all it's changing, you can see all of this is the same. Is the only difference is the numbers. The numbers are changed. And then the last one is for everything bigger than 1,200. We're going to have 3 columns. You know that because of the 26 pixels. So that's basically the same. But we're going to have 2 images in each of those 3 columns. So let's spread that out and we'll see that happen. And there we go, our 2 images inside each of those 3 columns. That is our adaptive layout. This is a nice little exercise that was developed for that. Most of the code you've been given, what was done there was a whole lot of columns were set up by using our divs and the classes there for the divs. We have class for column and the images inside each column. See that with there's 3 images in that column. There's some with 3 images, some with 4 images, and if we sort of stretch the page out, we can see, yeah, right. So this has got 4 images, this has got 3 images, it's got 3 images. Those are all the images shown there, and yeah, very, very nice. So that is the exercise. What you need to sort of be able to do really is just to add these media commands. Once you've got one lot of commands, the others are just basically a copy paste and then change the numbers. And that will give you your changing style. So we're kind of going in a kind of different order. We're doing this lab 9 and then we'll go back and do lab 8 because I think lab 8 is maybe a little trickier. So let's have a look at this one first. We just did setting up the columns and changing the percentages. Really, you're just playing with percents and seeing how that affects it, and then sort of applying that. Okay, so let's